people would say to me things like, everybody's doing the best they can. I don't think that's true because I know I'm not. But then somebody said, what people do makes sense to them. And I think that's true. We live in a hurting world. To hurt is natural. To forgive is supernatural. We're on a journey to forgiveness. When I had recorded a video a couple days ago, you might have seen it when I was near the ocean. After I was done and headed to the car, two guys were walking along the ocean and they were dressed in heavy, coarse brown robes with big rope belts. You don't see that near the beach very often. And so I asked them what their story was. Their names were Ben and Simon. They're actually part of a Franciscan order, actually a Reformed Franciscan order. And I told them I'm a pastor and I was talking about forgiveness. And you guys live in a monastic community. You're just devoted to prayer and worship and union with God. How often do issues of forgiveness come up for you? And Ben's immediate response was, every minute of every day. Seriously, when you live in a place like that with people like that, what is there to argue over? He chanted too loud at Vespers today. I think you wore my robe. But interestingly enough, if you know much about Francis of Assisi, this amazing life, maybe the most winsome, compelling Christian, since the first century, there were big conflict, schisms, fissures in his day. When he died, Brother Elias decided that they should build a lovely basilica to honor him and house his body. Brother Leo felt like, no, that's a betrayal of Francis's commitment to poverty and generosity. Brother Elias put out a marble box to collect the money. Brother Leo broke the box. Brother Elias was so mad, he actually had Brother Leo whipped and scourged. By the time of the Spanish Inquisition, the Franciscans were authorized by the Pope to use torture to get heretics to recant. There is no place in this world that is safe from hurt. But God has invented something called forgiveness, and I'm learning a lot about it these days. And what I want to talk to you about today is a part of the journey to magic eyes, to learning to see the people who have hurt me differently. We're using this little process called REACH from Ev Worthington, and the R stands for Recall the Hurt. So I want to talk to you about that one today, by looking at the story of Joseph and his brothers. And we'll return to that periodically because it's the climax of the book of Genesis, which is all about enormous hurt. Families are sources of incredible hurt. And as you might know, with Joseph, he ends up being kidnapped and sold as a slave by his brothers, who assume that they will never see him again. And he's lying in this cistern waiting to be taken away. You can imagine the thoughts of hurt and confusion and bitterness and hatred that would well up in him. Now, in recalling the hurt, what I do is I don't deny the fact that I have been hurt, but I go back and I look at it, this time not dwelling on my own victimhood and not rehearsing what a terrible person the person is that hurt me, because unforgiveness always causes me to want to reduce them to just one who hurt me. I remember often people would say to me things like, everybody's doing the best they can. I don't think that's true because I know I'm not. But then somebody said, what people do makes sense to them. And I think that's true. And then recalling the hurt, I try to go back and look at the situation where I was hurt and seek not to excuse or minimize or deny, but also not to rehearse how much injustice I've received, to look at it objectively, to look at it the way that a reporter or a historian might, to try to describe it in a way that everybody would agree with. And when we do that in the Joseph story, Genesis chapter 37, we find some quite remarkable things that apparently Joseph is not thinking about in chapter 37. It starts, Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report to them. Now, Joseph's the youngest, so he would be like the assistant shepherd, but he decides that he's going to act as the supervisor, and he tattles on his brothers to his father. The text tells us whose sons they were. You might remember that Jacob had 4 wives, Leah and Rachel, and their 2 servants. They're two slave women. These other sons that Joseph is with are the sons of the slave women, so they would be the lowest status sons. They would be the most vulnerable. And Joseph leverages that to tell something negative about them. He doesn't go to them and say, hey guys, I'm concerned with the level of your shepherding. Let's all bring it up a notch. He just goes to his dad. So they have to live with this. Text goes on. Now Israel, or Jacob, loved Joseph more than any of his other sons. You think about that. Favoritism is a theme that runs all through the book of Genesis and all through human families, and it does so much damage. And he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Now, they've been hurt by their father, but they feel hatred for their brother, because if they express hostility towards their dad, they would just be that much more rejected. And what's going on in our heart always comes out of our mouth. They find themselves unable to speak a kind word to their brother. But Joseph apparently does not notice this, or if he does notice it, he doesn't care, because the text goes on. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. And it was a very grandiose dream about the images of sheaves out in the field, when he says, my sheaf rose and stood upright while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. Now imagine telling your siblings you'd had that dream. His brother said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he said. There's no indication here that Joseph understood that power or eminence is something to be used to serve. Then he has another dream. And he said to his brothers, listen, I had another dream. This time the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father finally rebukes him. But apparently he does that because this time he's one of the ones that's going to bow down to Joseph. Really? And we're told his brothers were jealous of him. So there's jealousy and hatred that's brewing. And they have to live with this day after day. Story goes on. The brothers are off tending the sheep in Shechem. And his father says, go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the sheep and report back to me. Now, we already know Joseph has already been given bad reports about his brothers, and his father sends out to do it again. He sends him to Shechem. The reason he would be concerned about his sons at Shechem is that earlier in Genesis, Jacob's daughter Dinah was violated at Shechem, and two of his sons, Simeon and Levi, fool the men of Shechem. They pretend to agree that their sister Dinah could marry the prince of Shechem as long as all the men in Shechem get circumcised, and then when all the guys are recovering from that, they go there and kill them. So Jacob and his family don't have a good reputation at Shechem. Jacob is so clueless as a father that even though his sons hate Joseph, can't stand him, he wears that coat that his father had given him, this ornamental coat. That the only other time we see that word used, apparently, it's used for royalty. It's an indication not just of favoritism, but that probably Joseph is the one who would become the next patriarch. And Jacob is so blind to all this that he sends Joseph into great harm. And it's because his brothers have to live day after day knowing that Joseph is the favorite, and with Joseph's own grandiosity and with him making them look bad before the eyes of his father, and resentment and hatred brew, that when he comes, they say to themselves, here comes that dreamer, not our brother, not Joseph, here comes that dreamer. So there's a whole nother story that's most likely not occurring to Joseph. It's very interesting. This story of Joseph is so artly told, and we'll come back to it. In chapter 37, we are given very vivid descriptions of what it is that the other brothers think and feel, and quite a vivid picture of what it is that Jacob thinks and feels and how he reflects and what he's blind to. With Joseph, we don't get a clue. And it appears to be the case that Joseph does not notice or does not care what it is that his own brothers experience. He's got some work to do, and it will probably be done while he's suffering. Here's the task for today. Think about an area where you have been hurt. And this is something that I have been spending lots and lots of time on. And this can be quite difficult. So you might not want to take the deepest hurt in your life, just something that you're aware of. And recall it, but seek to do that in a different way, where now I'm not just rehearsing a story that will make me a victim and reinforce my sense of martyrdom and how I am subject to great injustice and what a bad person that person is. Actually walk back through that story and try to write it down. And I have done that in several cases, literally written it down. There's a do-it-yourself workbook by Ev Worthington. We sent out a link for that if you want to use that. That can be quite helpful. Write down the story of a hurt, only this time really try hard to be objective. Try to write it in such a way that the other person, the person who hurts you, your offender, would agree those are the facts of this situation. Don't excuse wrongdoing. Don't condone it. Don't deny it. Don't exaggerate it. God, would you begin to give me magic eyes? And that's the prayer for today as I look back on my past and seek to look at it in a different way and ask God for his help. Just pray, God, would you help me to look at this situation and the people involved with a different set of eyes? Remembering that what people do probably looks right to them. You know, the brothers lived with that sense of hatred and knowing they weren't the favorite, they weren't loved day after day after day. It's not like they grew up thinking we're going to choose one of our brothers and try to make him miserable. It was not that way. Most people don't say, I think I'll see what evil thing I can do today. What they do makes sense to them. And I will have to do some work to look through magic eyes. That's the journey. Magic eyes today. God, forgive us our debts as we forgive.
Thanks for joining us. At Become New, we want to grow spiritually one day at a time, but it's tough to do that alone. So we're offering a little more support for anyone who would like to work on putting the content into practice. You can sign up to receive a text at the end of each week in this series, asking if you completed the Here's How portion for that week. If you want, you can reply to the text and let us know how it went, or if you need prayer in taking those action steps. To sign up for the end of week reminder, just text the word MORE to 855-888-0444, and we'll put you on the list. As always, to receive the emails or video links by text, you can let us know at becomenew.com/subscribe. If you're already signed up for the emails but aren't getting them, try checking your spam folder, or better yet, you can add us to your contact list. Our email address is connect@becomenew.com. If you need prayer, we're here for you. Text your specific prayer request to 855-888-0444. There's a team of us who meet each weekday to pray specifically over every person who sends a text in. We'll catch you next time.